Welcome to the Brady Marcs podcast with your host Brady Yashia from Brady Marcs Buyers Advisory. Enjoy discussions with a variety of guests and pioneers from diverse backgrounds, each sharing their unique perspectives on property, business, industry and more.
Today on the podcast, we're thrilled to introduce Kirsty Farrenkothen, Director and Founder of Made Home Property Group. Kirsty has a unique approach to property that is grounded in her belief in simplifying the stressful and often overwhelming aspects of buying and moving into a new home. Her insight comes from her professional experience as a licensed real estate agent and buyer's agent and her personal journey, having moved over 15 times herself. This allows her to truly empathize with her clients, understanding the challenges of moving and the emotional toll it can take. Kirsty's deep commitment to her clients shines through in everything she does. Under her leadership, Made Home Property Group has become known for its client-first approach, combining industry experience with a genuine desire to exceed expectations. Kirsty hopes to reshape the moving experience through her work, empowering clients with a sense of control and clarity, whether they're first-time home buyers or seasoned investors. Join us as we dive into Kirsty's inspiring journey, her vision for Made Home, and the invaluable insights she brings to the world of real estate. Welcome, Kirsty.
Thank you for having me.
So, Made Home, I've got so many questions about Made Home. So, firstly, I'm going to say you're the founder and CEO of Made Home.
Correct.
Could you tell the listeners how the name came about, what Made Home is, and how clients can benefit from your services?
Absolutely. It's taken a long time. We're about 6 years old, and it's taken a long time to have the elevator pitch nailed because what we do is so broad. But in essence, we are sort of an end-to-end transition service. So we wanted to be the one-stop shop from when a client or a family decides to sell their home the whole way through to when they're settled in their next home. And so the name Made Home sort of it was that complete. It was how we wanted people to feel at the end of the process, that they felt like they had been made home. And so it was a bit of a play on words with the homemade shuffle. But yes, it's where the whole process and the idea is to really remove that stress of moving, which I think is in the top 3 stresses in anyone's life. I think divorce and moving are up there, and we just don't believe it needs to be that way.
Yeah,
so.
it certainly is. So what inspired you to start your own business and where did the vision come from? Or I should say, what is your vision for the business?
So my time in real estate, we worked with a lot of downsizers, and so it was sort of seeing a big gap in the market of the logistics of what it is to prep your house for sale and to move. And my experience of moving house myself, I sort of looked at the process and go, this is very simple to me, and I just you do X, Y, Z, and then it's done. And so to step into that space and going, actually, there's a lot of wisdom, not only wisdom, but practical hands-on help that can be offered here. So definitely when the business started, the heart was for that downsizer, that older client that needed the assistance. And then it's definitely developed and grown into anyone moving house, into investors, deceased estates, time-poor families. So it's definitely expanded and grown. But I'd say, the ultimate vision is to simplify that process. Like one of our taglines is the stressful made simple. And I think the moving process can be enjoyable. Even if the reasons for the move are negative, I think it can still be a very cathartic process and healing in a way. Yeah, so
there's a lot of positives that come out with using your services.
Absolutely.
So somebody's looking to move out of their home. They haven't even thought about decluttering, and they know that they've got to declutter, but not only declutter, get rid of some of the contents. Now, some things are valuable and some things are not. And then the next step comes to the packing, et cetera, et cetera. Yes. And I know there's another step in between, which is getting the house ready for sale. So how do you work with clients that have got this massive home filled with contents from the last 30 years? What's the process?
Yep. So we go into a home and we're always providing that sort of initial consultation where we're looking at what do they need for the whole process. So we'll often break up that quote into a few because it's too hard to quote the move when we're all the way at the start and we don't know how much they're going to get rid of, and there's just so much there. And so it's sending a team in and figuring out, okay, what needs to stay for the campaign? Is there a stylist involved? Working with them, what would they like to keep? And then what, as far as things that need to go, it's going, is it valuable? Where is it valuable? Is it an auction house item? Is it something, we can sell online? And then we're sort of moving down the tiers of, okay, if it can't be sold, can someone else enjoy it? So then we're going to women's shelters, a few charities that we work with, and basically trying to give anything a life that we can, because we just hate to see waste. And so we're trying to eliminate as much of that as possible. And then if we can't find a home for it in that capacity, we're seeing, can it be recycled? Where can it be recycled properly? And then at the end of the day, there's hopefully, if we've gone through all those levels, what goes into tip is as little as possible. And then, it's working with the other trades to get their home ready for sale, helping once they're on the market. It sort of rolls, one thing rolls into the next, and I could just keep going. But that's the initial process at the top. Yeah.
So as I said, it's quite an I don't know if I've mentioned this, but you've mentioned that you provide a stress-free service.
Yes.
It's very overwhelming, the thought of moving, let alone the decluttering process. Yes. What are some tips for somebody that's thinking about moving when they want to start the decluttering process?
Absolutely. Starting as early as possible is essential. I think it's one of those things that you have in your mind and then it just sort of gets put off and we do life. So early as possible, because we've had clients where we go in and they need to be on the market in 2 weeks. And all of a sudden what could be quite a enjoyable, cathartic process becomes incredibly stressful. It's not efficient. We end up having to pack things up, store them and sort them later. Whereas if you can get on top of it early, and then setting up a little system, I think, in your own house of if something hasn't been used for a year, going, okay, can that be passed on to somebody else? And then if it's a box at the door or something that's helping it get out of the house, I think we're all culprits of having the bag at the door or the bag in the boot of the car that sits there for 6 months before it goes anywhere. But at least it's a system of trying to move things on. I think often the issue is people don't know where to take things, especially when it comes to furniture, etc., which I think is where our service is valuable and that we've had 6 years of developing connections and working with people on how to get rid of that stuff. But I think, making little systems within your own house of, okay, I haven't used that or I haven't worn that item of clothing in a year, let's let someone else enjoy it, I think is a better way of, rather than decluttering, it's someone else can give this thing life rather than it sitting in your cupboard not being used. So.
I think the biggest thing is just getting started.
Oh, absolutely.
Because procrastination is number one when it comes to moving.
And so often, we might have done a session with someone on a Friday and then we come in on the Monday and they've done a whole bunch themselves because they get a little taste of actually how easy it is. And they've just gotten started and they can see progress in one area and then we come back and they've done a whole other area and they go, oh, I've got the bug. So often I think that happens. Once you get going, you can't stop.
So what made you get involved in the real estate arena even prior to Made Home? What was it?
So I remember growing up, Mum and Dad, we bought and flipped property. We'd moved over to England. They'd done a couple of renovations over there. So I think it's always been ingrained in me, that property element. There was a show in the UK called Property Ladder. And it was just like our evening show after dinner. We'd all watch Property Ladder together. I think I was 7. And so I think it was just, always in me that I would love to do real estate. And then I think for my year 11 geography research project, I chose a real estate topic of how location, I think, affects property prices or something like that. And I reached out to a friend in real estate and he just gave me a couple of, resources for this project. And then he's like, oh, you should come and work for me. And I was like, okay. And so then in year 12, that was my Saturday job. And then from there, it just sort of, as I left school, I thought, I love this. This is what I want to do. And I loved that being in people's homes, working with them in that process. But yes, it was my time in that space of going, oh, actually, there's a niche here. And so with being able to have my foot in that industry, but in a different way, which is really lovely.
So the good thing is you've got to understand that side of the equation, how it is when you're selling a home, when you're buying a home, and meeting so many different people gave you the insight as to how they think, how they feel, and where their stresses are.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you say you've helped over 250 families.
Yeah.
Do you have a memorable experience that stands out that you'd like to share with the listeners?
Oh, goodness. There are so many. every family and client's so different, and all their stories are so different. So I could just keep talking about so many stories. But I think one of the initial ones that really spurred me on for this business, it probably would have been one of my first, 2 or 3 clients. It was an older couple. It was just me, and I was going through a kitchen drawer with her. She was probably in her 70s or 80s. And the husband pulled me aside. We'd had so much tea and cake by this point, I hadn't even started doing the work. And the husband pulled me aside and said, "Oh, she's got really bad dementia. She's really struggling with this process, really struggles to let go of things." And I was probably 20 at this point. So I'm like, okay, felt like I was spinning. I'm like, how do I do this? And so we just went really slowly through this kitchen drawer. I went through every item and I said, "Can someone else use this?" And she got really excited about the idea of passing it on. And at the end of the day, she said, "That was really enjoyable." And that word enjoyable was in the creation of the business was one of my key words of I wanted to make moving enjoyable. And just the fact that she chose that word to describe this day, which the husband was really worried about her finding it really stressful. And then she said that it was enjoyable. I think I got in my car and I just cried because it was just, I knew I was doing the right thing and that there was a need for this service and that I could make it better. So that was one. Oh, there are so many, but I think that was one of the early days that really solidified my heart behind this business. And then they've been amazing. We've done phenomenal moves into, $30 million properties in Double Bay, and we've worked in, the worst of the worst and the best of the best. So it's so broad. I couldn't tell you all the stories, but that's just one.
Well, they do say that every day in real estate is different.
Absolutely.
And it comes with lots of different emotions, but that's a special story and one that you'll carry forever.
I'll hold on to that forever. Yeah.
One thing you also mentioned is that your business grew the most in your first year of motherhood.
It did, yeah.
How do you manage to juggle being a mum and run such a highly successful business?
I'm in the thick of that question at the moment. We've just had our second and he's 10 weeks old. And
congratulations.
So, thank you. And so I feel all again in that throw of how do I do this juggle? I think I had developed a rhythm with my first. But I think the reason the business grew so much was I was doing the role personally of probably, of 3 women. And so when I outsourced those roles to people who had, 2 women who had, now 4 women, but at the time 2 women, who were then doing full-time jobs, and I was still doing my job, I go, I was doing the job of 3 full-time women. And so I think all of a sudden it could be done properly and at a higher level rather than me being spread so thin. And I think it just scaled from there in that now there are 4 women doing the job that I was doing by myself. And so it's just being done. And also hiring women that are really skilled in those areas has been amazing. So letting them thrive in that role. And so it's allowed me actually to step into a space of setting vision, building partnerships, developing the business at a higher level. I think it's the phrase I get to work on the business, not in the business. And that's helped, yeah.
And I guess with every successful business is having the right team behind you. And some people have a stronger skill set in one thing and others in another part of the job. So I think it's important that you not only reflect on what you don't need to be doing and what another person in the team can be doing. Yeah. And have you had any mentors along the way that have stood out?
I've got a business coach at the moment who's been phenomenal, and actually as a part of that coaching, we have like a board meeting that we meet every month, and so that's been amazing to be in the room with other business owners that aren't in the same field at all. We're all doing completely different things, but to bring an issue of, cash flow or marketing or HR problems, and everyone's had the same issue even though we're in completely different fields. And so that's been an amazing sounding board because I think it can be unusually lonely running a business, even though our team is now 15 women, but I'm not having the same conversations with them that I do with this group of phenomenal business owners where we can just bounce ideas off each other, and that's been a really beautiful space for the development of the business. Yeah.
Fantastic. Your team members have got so much energy, so much enthusiasm, and are so positive.
Yes.
How do you keep this culture going and maintain such good team collaboration?
It's a good question, and one that we had a team meeting on Thursday, and it was great because there are probably 4 new staff that I hadn't even met yet that had been hired whilst I'd been on maternity leave. And I was asking some of the older team members that had been there for a while, what do you love most about Made Home? And one of them said, just the culture of the workplace and, how encouraging and supporting this team is and the women are of each other. And it was just, I remember thinking, how is that culture, exactly that question, how has that culture remained even though I'm so far removed from the picture? And I think it's every now and then coming back and setting vision, explaining or sharing stories as to what's so important about Made Home. And I think that sets the undertone of what's important to us as a team, what do we want to provide our clients, how do we want to look after each other as a team. I think with the certain jobs that we're on, like some of them can be very trying, very difficult. And so having that teamwork is essential because otherwise my team wouldn't hang around.
Exactly, yes.
We've worked with hoarder level houses that are very difficult. And clients in general, we're entering into their most stressful season. And so there's a lot of grace needed for the client. And so supporting each other as a team is essential. We have a team getaway every year. We have dinners often. I like to check in with all of them as much as I can. So I assume I'm doing something right with the culture.
Yes.
But also, even though I'm removed, the culture's remained. So it means that I'm hiring the right people. So that's a good thing.
And that's the key to it.
Yeah.
You mentioned that I shouldn't say you mentioned, I heard you were writing a book. Is that complete?
Well, it was written so long ago. It was actually during the second COVID lockdown, one of the COVID lockdowns, and I was just at home and I thought there's a market of people we're not really ever going to reach in that it's the younger generations that are very capable themselves. They might not necessarily have the finances or the budget to hire us. And so I was like, there's a lot of wisdom I've got that they need if they're not going to hire our services. So I thought, I'll just put it all down on paper. And it just word vomited out of me in about a week. And I just typed and typed and typed. And it ended up being far too long. And then that's sort of where it got stuck in that to go back and edit it, I was like, okay, I need to do this at some point. And then I had children and now here we are. So it's still sitting there and I've got a printed copy of it in my cupboard at home and I just need to get back into it and edit it because I know there's so much gold in there that would be valuable to a lot of people that aren't going to use our services, but it means that our wisdom of having helped so many people move house could be shared. So I need to get back onto it.
I think you'd have a lot of people buying that book. Yeah. And does it have a name?
So You're Moving was going to be it. And again, that was very early day thinking, but it's so you're moving.
You're moving.
What have you got to do? What are the steps? So we'll get to it at some point. Hopefully soon.
Well, I look forward to reading it.
Yeah, there'll be lots of practical help in there, for people moving. So.
Excellent. So what do you think are the biggest challenges that buyers or sellers face today when either getting their home ready for sale or moving into a property?
I think there's always a timing element, and I imagine you would see that a lot with your clients of that whole do we buy first, do we sell first, and then that juggle. So often we get bought in of we've bought a property and we need to now sell very quickly, and so they need the assistance to get on the market as fast as possible. And then also at the other end, when we're practically moving them, spontaneous settlements, how do they time that? Do they put stuff into storage? Do they stay somewhere else? And so there's a whole bunch of juggles there. We love it when they can go away for a couple of nights and we can just do the move for them and then they can walk into their home and it's all done. Timing can be really difficult, which is where I say get started as early as possible. So if they did find the right property, that they're ready to go. Especially those homes where they've lived in them for 50, 60 years, going, let's just do some sessions once a week for 6 months so that when the time comes or, if someone falls unwell or if, the worst happens and they need to sell quickly, they're prepared to do so. Timing, there are a few, I'm sure, but I think that would be a big one on multiple levels, yeah.
So what's your ideal client? Is there one?
Well, and I was saying this to the team on Thursday. They're the ones where you get in and you do it with them and we've developed this beautiful relationship. We've got some clients that will be lifelong friends. And so there are those ones. But then there are those that say, here are the keys. we're going to the beach house for 2 weeks, just do it for us. And, we don't get to develop that beautiful relationship with them, but it does allow us to be incredibly efficient. We can get in, do the job, and not necessarily need to dance around a client and then it's amazing because then we get to set up the home, the fridge is full, their beds are made, and they just get to walk in the door with their suitcase and it's all done. So there's definitely an element of satisfaction for that sort of client. But, working with that downsizer for a year is a beautiful experience because then we get to walk with them through that process of saying goodbye to their home and then setting them up in their new chapter is beautiful as well. And again, we go back for tea and check in on them. So there's two very different types of clients,
yes.
and they all have their positives and negatives, I'm sure.
Well, I often say to downsizers, I know it's very daunting, but you don't necessarily need to downgrade when you're downsizing.
Correct, yeah.
You are going to open a new chapter in your life where you could have a phenomenal new lifestyle. Yeah. And also the quality and the finishes in your new home with even some lovely views or outlooks will make you so happy that you'll actually say, why didn't I do this
sooner?
Exactly.
We get that phrase exactly, why didn't I do this sooner? Often because, they feel so, there's a freedom that comes with it in that they're not looking after a big property anymore or, they're physically able to, manage their home and absolutely. Or they have gone somewhere with beautiful views because all of a sudden they can afford something very different and new or whatever it is. But absolutely, I agree.
Yes. So as a buyer's agent, I always strive and my goal is to help my clients make an informed decision or informed decisions. When a client engages with your company, how do you and your team help your clients make informed decisions?
There's a lot of hearing. It's funny, that initial meeting, whilst we are developing a quote, it's really just listening to them and hearing what the problem is that we can solve for them, I guess, and hearing their timeline, getting the whole picture. Often we're working with the real estate agent, so it's having their input and wisdom into how can we best serve this client by understanding the whole picture, I think. And it's important for our team it's important for the client that the whole team knows the whole picture so that we're all informed to provide the best service for them. So, by understanding that, they need to put stuff in storage because the rest of their picture looks like X, Y, Z means that we do our processes slightly differently and allowing us to inform the client by understanding the whole picture. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. Absolutely.
Yeah. And so we can make their pathway as smooth as possible because we can see the whole picture rather than just a small portion, which I think is the uniqueness of our business in that if you hire a packing and moving company, they're seeing a small part of it, or if you hire just a declutterer, then they're not looking at the other side of the picture, whereas we get to work alongside often the agent or buyer's agent, and so we get to walk that whole journey with them, which allows us to do the process in a better way.
And for the client, it's a sense of comfort for them because they're not walking this journey alone.
Yeah.
I mean, we do our jobs every day. We buy homes. We see the different scenarios. But for people that have lived in a home for a long period of time,
absolutely,
don't see what we see every day. So they actually need to be made to feel like it's okay. Yep. We're there to help you. This is what it looks like. So
there's
it's
a lot of hand holding.
Yeah.
And just reassurance. And I think there's a confidence in us because we have done it so many times. And I forget that as well, that we come in and we do our process, but actually slowing down enough to go, you haven't moved in. I think the longest client we had was like 84 years or something. She'd lived there as a girl. And I'm like, you don't know how this process goes. You don't know how to move house because you've never done it. And so holding their hand and doing that process with them. It's a beautiful opportunity. Like it's an honour to be invited into
absolutely
that space.
Yes. Yeah, I agree. So you all need to have lots of energy in your team.
Yes, yeah, absolutely.
How do you keep fit and unwind when you need to recharge?
Well, that's often in our interviewing process, because we've got a range of women in our team. Like I think our youngest would be about 19, but then our oldest would maybe be 65. And it is one of the questions is, are you physically able and well? Because there is an element of needing to, we're not removalists by any stretch, but being on your feet all day, it's physically very demanding. The unwinding, I think having the team helps in that you get to, at the end of a shift, just debrief it together if it was difficult or challenging in ways. But no, switching off is difficult. I personally find it very difficult, and I ponder and think about the client for a long time afterwards. And so, unwinding I probably could be better at. But I think, having the team together means that for those difficult days, they can debrief it together. But no, the energy, I think, just comes from enjoying what they do and that they love the work. And so they come to work and they're excited because it's different every time. They walk through the door and what are we going to have today? And a sense of satisfaction as well, I think, probably energises them. To see a job completed at the end of the day.
You need to be passionate about what you do.
Absolutely, yeah.
So what's next for Made Home? Are there any exciting projects in the making?
We'd love to head out into the eastern suburbs. Northern Beaches was this year's plan so we started on the North Shore because that's just where my connections were, and it was very easy. It made sense. The demographic is right. And then we stretched out to Northern Beaches this year, which has been wonderful. And then the eastern suburbs, we probably go over there once a month just through word of mouth. But I haven't necessarily tapped into, the real estate agents over there, built partnerships over there. I'd like to build a team over there because the market is ripe for the picking. So eastern suburbs is probably 2025. My gosh, I feel like 2024 is nearly over.
I know, it's crazy.
Eastern suburbs is probably next. And then on a grander scale, we were chatting earlier about, what city would we go to next? Because everyone's moving house. Everyone's at some point, everyone needs the help, So I think it would be about picking the right city, finding the right people, the right team, and then clicking copy and paste. Yeah.
Well, once you've got the formula right, the rest works very well.
Yeah. And I think stepping back to have my children and on maternity leave has meant that the business isn't Kirsty anymore, and that it is I can replicate that. Whereas before, Made Home was Kirsty, Kirsty was Made Home, and now it's actually a business model that functions and works well, and I can copy and paste that in other places. So that's exciting.
Yeah, very exciting.
Yeah.
So for our listeners today, what would your top 3 tips be for them to start thinking about, besides what you said earlier on about keeping a box at the front of the house? If they are looking to sell next year and make the move, what would your top 3 tips be? Organise a consult with us. On a practical level, yes, because then we can talk through what's their scenario, what's their picture, how can we help? It's just nice to have that conversation and hear the story. What would my top 3 be? Getting to other opens and having a look around, I think, to understand what are other properties being presented like? What are you competing with, in essence? Because I think if you haven't sold your home in 50 years, you don't necessarily know what level you need to be at in your preparations and and how the home looks. So I think that's a helpful one, of just getting educated in that arena. I could have prepared many. I probably should look back at the book. It'll be in there. What would my third be? Yeah, getting started early, definitely. Getting a sense of what you do and don't want to take with you, I think. That's a tricky question. I'm sorry. That's okay. So, when they say decluttering your clothing and your wardrobe, some philosophies out there are that if you haven't worn it for a year, get rid of it. Yeah. Is there something when you're decluttering a house that people say?
Oh, yeah. So I'm actually finding it interesting in this season now of if you haven't worn it for a year, because I'm going through, I've just been pregnant, so the clothes I definitely haven't worn for a year. So I'm like, that doesn't work anymore. And it's not necessarily straight up Marie Kondo, but things that bring you joy. If you don't love it anymore and it's not serving you, then let somebody else enjoy it. Is it broken? If it's broken, tatty. And then there's often the pile. It's interesting. There's clients that go, oh, I'm going to fix that. And there's the pile at the door of things I'm going to fix, or I'm going to send that to someone and then I'll use it. I'd say those things can go. If you're not using it, you don't love it. If it's broken, I find it in my nature very easy to throw things, but I think we develop that relationship with the client that if they are struggling, we can figure out why and figure out what the story is behind that thing that is going to help them let go. And often once they've shared the story, they feel like they've had that memory, they've shared it, and then it makes it easier for them to pass on. And when we let them know as well that, it's going to a women's shelter, or they all of a sudden go, oh, and they bring all these other things because they know that they're helping someone. So that's you can see that shift in people when they know that it's actually going to help somebody else. Because I think it's probably an innate desire in all of us to help.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah, it's very important. So, Kirsty, on a personal note, do you have a favourite quote?
I do. Amanda Jones, she's a beautiful artist, has a quote, why do we rush to grow? Things that grow fast, weeds. Things that grow slow, trees. And I think on a business, on every level, that's in my nature. I want to do things very quickly. I want to power forwards and get things done. But in reality, sometimes I just need to slow down and do things well rather than weeds, grow some trees instead.
There's no rush.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's a beautiful quote.
Yeah.
So before we wrap up, is there any message you'd like to leave our listeners with today, particularly those that are embarking on a moving journey next year?
It's going to be okay. I think being kind to yourself in that process, it is very, even when our services are involved, it is a very overwhelming time. You're uprooting yourself, everything you know, change is very overwhelming. And so going slow, being kind to yourself throughout that process, and getting help, I think, if it's available to you, because it's a huge process. So it's okay that it's difficult.
Yeah. Well, I can vouch for those listeners out there that need help. They definitely need to contact you. Our clients have been very, very happy with your services.
It's been a pleasure helping them.
So for anyone that wants to reach out to you, what's the best way that they can make contact?
A couple of ways. There's our website, which has an inquiry form. There's a phone number on there, through our socials. They'll all get back to either me or to our team. So all the normal ways. Yeah.
Fantastic.
Beautiful. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure having you here today.
Thanks, Brady.